4th of July weekend. Welcome to Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel again this week. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College. And Father Toan, St. John the Apostle Catholic Church in Brandenburg. Our first topic, nearly all the 200 bills passed into law by the Kentucky General Assembly last session went into effect this week. They include legalized sports betting, a law that allows principals to decide when disruptive students are removed from the classroom, and a law that restores 4 of the 14 weeks of unemployment benefits lawmakers eliminated a year ago. A federal judge has temporarily blocked one new law, a ban on puberty blockers and hormone therapy for trans youth. So turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, let's hear your impression on the focus of Kentucky lawmakers.
I think there are a lot of problems here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and they need solving. But I'm appalled at some of the choices of issues to confront that that our legislature has chosen, particularly against going against a very small and persecuted group of children and young people, and that's very sad. My heart goes out to those families. I've seen emails from colleagues who are operating in other states, and they are leaving their congregations because they and their families no longer feel safe in municipalities and states where these laws have gone into effect. And I think that's so sad that people have to uproot themselves because of the actions of the government.
Yeah, I concur. It seems that the legislature, the bills that have passed, has a capitalist fiscal connection with all of that, and to diminish the value of life for that which ends up being fiscal seems to be sort of egregious. How it is appalling to me that we can't see persons as human beings, but we see aspects of their humanity to determine how we legislate. And we legislate and pass laws on the basis of ideological, philosophical categories that are placed on by those who are in power. And these laws, particularly the laws that are egregious to trans individuals in our community, have a direct relationship to their physical safety. So the laws that are passed that identifies these individuals as other, and whatever the other you describe, whether it's race-based, gendered, or whatever, there are those that benefit from the privilege of, from the power of privilege, who have other communities who will take it upon themselves to help to execute the law that was passed, whether it's related to health or health care. These laws identify these persons and they become targeted in dangerous ways. And so my heart breaks along with Stan. My heart breaks to know that as a result of this is connected to the abortion laws that have been pulled back. Today, we just had the news about affirmative action. While there are policy ideas that undergird these, underneath each of these is a hatred of people that gets manifested in ways that others outside of the legislature will decide to do to risk the safety of these individuals.
I have a couple of thoughts that I would like to offer here. It's first, I read through the articles and the several that printed out to us, 8 out of 10, I would say. The first one is the gray games ban. Although I don't have, a unique answer to this, but I remember the parish where I am now, 20 years or so ago, before we closed our school. And as you know, whenever a church or a parish closes school, usually it has to do with money. And prior to that, one of the things our parish used to do, or try to do to raise fund for the school was lottery. And it was game. And we noticed that for many people with paycheck who live from paycheck to paycheck, and even on government aid and all of that, they came to play game out of their paycheck. And one of the moral questions that we answer, and we have to be honest, is whether we should, as a church, we should have such a game or sponsor things like that to make money out of the already poor folks. So in a sense, the game banning, I do have, although on the one hand I have mixed feelings, but at the same time, I think that if we can reduce somehow the addiction to games, just like every other addiction, it will help the general population. The second thought I would like to say about the gender affirming thing is that I don't see that when an adult make a decision, I don't see that is wrong whether that person wanted to do this or do that. But again, for a young child who's still growing up, and just like many other things, for example, alcohol, driving law, traffic law, smoking, we have law that require people at a certain age to come to terms with themselves, to be able to make decisions. I see that for young people, since they have not understood yet the whole issues about whether they want to go through transgenders operation and all of that, I think it also has some good side to that, to restrict some of the procedure that allowed them to do when later on, years from now, decades or so, when they grow up and they regret that. I think that such decisions should be made by the person. Of course, we respect, but it should be made as an adult, but not as a child. That's just my thought.
Well, John, to your general question about the focus of the legislature, if you're trying to find consistency and coherence out of Frankfurt, you will be looking for a long time. A number of the pieces of legislation that will go into effect emanating from the Republican-controlled House and Senate in their supermajorities in Frankfurt, many of which cut against other moral philosophical ideologies that supposedly are held, such as the value of life, as Kilen was pointing out. Again, another inconsistency coming out of Frankfurt that runs counter to other platforms advocated and advanced on a certain side of the aisle in the state of Kentucky has to do with the gray machines. Principally what happened there was that the horse racing industry, Churchill Downs and other entities that seek to preserve horse racing, which is principally funded at this point in the state of Kentucky, are largely funded by slot machines, by games that are just like these gray machines, the historical betting machines. Those go to support the horse racing industry. It was because of a threat to those machines and that monopoly in the horse racing industry that gray machines, which essentially do the same thing as historical betting machines, have been outlawed in the state of Kentucky. And so it's business as usual, which is chaos, inconsistency. And it's not surprising that we find ourselves in this strange web and maze that we find ourselves in at the moment. One thing I do want to mention to Father Tran's comments about the trans bill, SB 150, I do just want to note that yesterday a federal district court judge, David Hale, put in place a temporary injunction that means that two portions of SB 150 are not going into effect this week. And that is the puberty blocking medication that adolescents would receive and hormone therapy treatment. Both of those procedures can continue legally in the state of Kentucky. That's my understanding. Now, while other aspects of SB 150 are going into effect today, and just to address those two specific issues related to SB 150 quickly, while yes, there is a point in time at which individuals need to be in a position where they are mature enough to make decisions for themselves. What makes this unique, and I think it's really important that the general public understands this, is that these therapies, the hormone therapy and the puberty blocker, put a person in a position when they reach an age when they can make a decision for themselves regarding their gender identity, where they can do it without serious physical, emotional, and social repercussions. It slows down that physical bodily development, the hormone therapies and the puberty blockers, so that then when a person gets to an age, 18, 21, 25, of where they can make that own decision for themselves, their body hasn't already evolved to a point whereby it's much more difficult to go through that process. So yes, Father Tran, I agree. There are protections that need to be put in place for minors, for young people about making decisions of this magnitude. The delicate balance that we're trying to strike here, I believe, is a lot of these treatments are actually ones that put people in a position where they can then make a decision about their gender identity when they get to an age of majority. So things are confusing, things are moving. There are legal judicial injunctions that have been levied. There will be more court battles. The gray gaming issue is unresolved. Right now, they are barred in the state of Kentucky. However, that is an injunction that's temporarily in place while there are issues regarding who can hear a case regarding gray gaming. Daniel Cameron doesn't want that to be heard in Franklin Circuit Court. And so before other issues regarding gray games are heard, there will be hearings in the judicial system regarding whether or not that case can be heard or where it should be heard. So welcome to Kentucky 2023.
So it looks like those topics will be on Moral Side of the News for weeks and months to come. We'll see how
indeed.
it goes.
Yes, indeed.
All right. We will move along to a second topic here on Moral Side of the News, a little different. It's hard to fathom the widespread effects of Canadian wildfires. This week, our region has been in a code red for unhealthy air quality. I know I've noticed it, panel. We all look forward to breathing easier. Let's hear your thoughts.
I would just briefly want to state that nations come after nature. I mean, this is one solid earth, and the borders of nations, while legal, yes, and have historical precedent, are arbitrary at best, given the history of our world together. And nature doesn't operate by borders. And so when you have fires in one part of the world, when you have nuclear blasts that are man-made in the other side of the world, it will have impacts on other people in other parts of the world. And so it is a reminder of how connected we are as human beings, that given the different limitations of borders and what borders do to us psychologically and collectively as human beings, nature reminds us that we are all, as the scripture says in the Bible, out of one blood, all human beings are created. And so this is a reminder of that. What happens in Canada it environmentally affects us here in America. What we do in America in various ways impact people all over the world. We're one connected body. And I pray for help for everyone who may be having a hard time with the pollutants that are in the air right now.
I remember when I was still living in Melbourne, Australia. In Australia, they don't use the phrase wildfires. They use bushfires. They use the term bushfires because I think of the climate and the region, but in theory it's pretty much the same. And it's a recurring disaster year on year in Australia. And the good thing is, for many decades to this point, until I left there, both countries, the U.S. and Australia, they send firefighters across the board to help. Whenever the western part of the U.S. needed them, they sent people, and whenever they needed American firefighters, we sent them. And I hope that will continue. And I do hope also that somehow we can help Canada in this fight. And I agree that when this happened, people should exercise cautions, like some of the suggestion to keep, while it's lasting, try to keep activities fewer outdoor and try to be indoor more, because this is an act of nature, and we are part of it. Just like Kilen said, we are part of the whole picture.
I was in New York earlier last month when this came down for the first time, and it was almost terrifying. First of all, you walked outside and you could not see to the top of buildings. Secondly, if you took a breath, you felt like you were in the middle of a campfire somewhere. And thirdly, everyone all of a sudden was walking around with masks, just like 3 years ago. And speaking for myself, that is a part of history that I want to consign to history. I don't want to have to relive it, but I was forced to in New York City earlier this summer. And what we've experienced in Louisville has been traumatic, but it was nothing compared to what was happening earlier this month in New York.
Well, and I'll just quickly add, I've learned my lesson. Yesterday morning, which would have been Wednesday, I found myself at 11:05 a.m. at the very tip top of the Ferris wheel at Kentucky Kingdom. Kentucky Kingdom opens at 11. The first thing that my 9-year-old daughter and her friend wanted to do was the Ferris wheel. We were the first people on the Ferris wheel. At the very top of that Ferris wheel, located right there near the airport where I-65, the Watterson Expressway, intersect one another. From that vantage point, I should be able to see Indiana. I should be able to see on the other side of the airport, Iroquois Park, and the hills that rise and make Jefferson Memorial Forest, that side of the south side of Jefferson County, North Bullitt County. I could not see the terminal across the Watterson at the airport at 11 o'clock yesterday morning. Now, this was a long-planned trip to Kentucky Kingdom, and there would have been hell to pay if that trip would have been truncated or canceled altogether. And so we stuck it out. But I will say, last night, although I consider myself still in largely good health, I felt it. I felt it when I got home. My voice was raspy, a little tingle in the throat, a little tingle in the nose. And so all that's to say, moving forward, especially after getting a full dose of the experience yesterday. I know that I personally will think differently about my time outside for myself and my children as long as we are dealing with these circumstances.
These are definitely unplanned circumstances that helps us and reminds us that there are forces so much greater than us, and it behooves our collective working together as neighborhoods, as families, as nations. We have to work together. And with Father Doe, I really am praying that there are world resources that can help Canada at this point to diminish, but it's going to be with us for some time. So we have to all exercise caution.
Does it ever rain in Canada? Goodness. I haven't heard about the deserts of Canada.
It's always something, and let's hope they get rain up north in the Canadian provinces affected. All right, panel, we've got about 7 minutes left of our program, Moral Side of the News. One more topic to sneak in today. The program that posts bail for people unable to afford it says it will stop that practice next month. Instead, the Louisville Bail Project says it will become exclusively an advocacy and lobbying organization for bail reform and reduced incarcerations. But Leo Smith, chief Jefferson public defender, said the decision is, quote, not good news, that is, for the Louisville community, especially poor people, end quote. So panelists, let's hear your thoughts about this.
I would like to say this, maybe I'm the first one in this, but I've always believed in education. At the same time, I also believe in what Aristotle used to say, that we have to punish the wrong. But education is very important in that I hope for a better society in which young people are educated what is the wrong versus what is the right, and they lean toward the right and not toward the wrong. In that, if young children learn how to do it and learn how to practice that, then growing up, they will fewer people will commit the wrong, and less that we have to punish the wrong. This is a very complicated issue. I read it, I thought about it, and I said to myself, wow, how are we going to solve this complexity? And really, I have no solution in that, but I just hope that whatever the final outcome will be, we need to teach our children, starting with family at home, to know what is right and avoid what is wrong.
Father Tran, I agree with what you said, but I also have to think we are facing this problem because 40 years ago or so, an entire safety net ceased to exist in the United States of America. And people who were suffering from mental illness all of a sudden had no place to go. They were on the street. They would do something that would be problematic. And because there was no place to go, the only place they ended up was in jail. And that just exploded our incarcerated population. And we need to go back one step at a time to deal with troubled people who may not necessarily be people in trouble.
Well, in my view, whether one has mental illness or not, it is unjust to incarcerate someone for a fine. Bottom line, full stop. That is inhumane and unjust. And the only benefit is not just justice, but economic benefit for the usage of those fines. So that needs to be reformed, and that is just an unjust concept. That because a person can't afford to pay a fine for whatever the charge is, that before you're even charged, before you're even found guilty, you have to do time in jail. That is unjust.
Yes, I agree.
Well, and that gets to an underlying moral principle upon which our legal and judicial system is based, and that's the concept of innocence until guilt is proven. And our current system, how it is functioning in actuality, is not reflective of that value. And then the downstream effects of pre-sentence incarceration of folks being jailed before being found guilty is immense, and especially onerous and burdensome for the poor and people of color. I mean, if you spend 3 days in jail, and your employer expects you to show up each of those 3 days, and you are unable to contact them, guess what happens? You lose your job. Then from there, that makes you housing vulnerable. It makes you food insecure. It makes your family stability untenable at best. So the trickle effects of that are significant, and then they just compound and snowball and keep rolling downhill. And the fact that the Louisville Bail Project has demonstrated that people show up when they are not carrying the weight of that bail on their shoulders at a rate of 90% over the course of many years. That's a significant amount of data that demonstrates people want to show up, they want to do the right thing, but sitting in jail while waiting for proceedings to occur is a travesty.
Yes.
All right, panel, we've got just about a minute left. It's the 4th of July, summer's big holiday. Briefly, quickly, do you have any plans to go out and celebrate?
As an immigrant myself and my family 30 years ago this year, believe it or not, I do believe in the 4th of July, freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And so I really wish every American appreciate the 4th of July as I myself do. And I hope that my family will have some cookout. And happy 4th of July to everyone.
Anyone else? Quickly. We got just a couple of seconds.
Father Tran, thank you for your voice and for reminding us of the promise and the potential of this wonderful country.
Yes.
Well said. That'll bring to a close this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you, Stan Miles, Kilen Gray, Jason Crosby, and Toan. We wish our viewers and listeners a happy 4th of July. We'll be back with an all-new conversation next week. Thanks, panel. Thanks to you, the 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children was a huge success. But it's not too late to donate. You can donate anytime. Just go to whascrusade.org. That's whascrusade.org, and see the many ways you can donate. You can always mail your contribution to 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202. Thanks for changing a child's life by contributing to the WHAS Crusade for Children.